I really would like to get her back safely and carry on with our life.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me here again today. Last week we spoke about the Baines Clough murders, and if you haven't seen that, I will link it somewhere up here for you. But today we're going to talk about a case that sadly is not uncommon in South Africa, where cases of violence happen across university campuses here. But this case involves everything that a really good Hollywood action movie would consist of. There's kidnapping, murder, beautiful women, ransom drop-off, just everything you can think of is in this case. But today we are going to talk about the Leigh Mattherws case. And if you would like to know how the story panned out, then let's get into it.
Intended for mature audiences only.
Leigh Mattherws was born on the 8th of July 1983 to her dad, Rob Mattherws, and her mom, Sharon Mattherws. Leigh had one sibling at the time, and that was her sister named Karen. Rob, who was Leigh's dad, was quite the successful entrepreneur. He did own an IT business that he was able to support his family off of. I'm not sure if Sharon worked, but he was able to support his wife and his children off his salary. Leigh was said to be really loved by her friends. She was very compassionate, kind, and always willing to help people whenever she could. She was very popular, apparently, and she always had a smile on her face. People also said that even though they knew that Leigh came from a wealthy background, she was very, very humble, so she never flashed her wealth around. So from everything that I looked up, it seemed that Karen and Leigh had a very normal childhood. There was nothing that was out of the ordinary. Leigh did go to university, and she went to a university called Bond. And I'm not sure if this was maybe part of an Australian kind of university scheme. People from Australia come here and kind of vice versa. So it was linked to Australia, I think. But I don't think that this particular campus exists anymore. But this university was based in Johannesburg, Sandton specifically, and Leigh was busy studying for a bachelor's in commerce. So while Leigh was growing up, she loved this ring that was made of tanzanite that her mother always wore, and she used to love how it used to sparkle and shine, and she said that one day she wanted to have the exact ring that her mom had. And when Leigh turned 21 on the 8th of July 2004, she got her wish, and the morning that she woke up, her mom and her sister walked into her room, surprised her, kisses, cuddles, and gave her her birthday present. And this was the tanzanite ring that she had been hoping for a very long time. She had an identical ring to her mother's for her 21st birthday. Because Leigh was very dedicated, she didn't take the day off on her 21st birthday. She did attend university on Friday, I think it was. She met up with her friends, and they decided to go to a few of their classes. And then in between the gap of their classes, they would go to the mall that was right next to the university. And they were just going to go there to get presents for another friend who was having a birthday around the same time as Leigh. So they just wanted to make sure that they had everything organized. So while Leigh's busy paying for everything, she opens her purse and she realizes that she still has her mother's credit card in her purse. And she's like, oh, now what? Now I have to call my mother, and now she has to come out to fetch her credit card, which she did. So she calls her mom and she's like, Mom, I have your stuff. Can you please come fetch it at the university parking lot? I'll meet you there at 10 o'clock in the morning. So her mom's like, okay, cool. I'll come fetch it and I'll meet you there at 10. Please don't be late because I have something else on. So like I said, I'm not sure if she worked, but she had something else on that she needed to meet Leigh at that specific time. So most universities in South Africa are access controlled, except when you have a really, really big campus where they kind of can't control that kind of access, or sometimes we have universities which are actually little towns themselves, and that's like University of Stellenbosch, or like UCT is a very big campus, so some campuses are access controlled but others aren't. But the point of this is that Bond University at the time was small enough that they could control the people who were coming in and out. So at the gate where you would enter the university, they had a security guard who was posted at the entrance, and you would either show him or her your student card, or you would have to swipe in. So there was definitely some kind of facial recognition that was happening at that time. And if you didn't have an access control card, or you weren't a student at the university, you would have to sign an attendance register. So like I said, Leigh's mom arrived at 10 a.m. and she's waiting. And she thinks maybe Leigh's held up, maybe she was still in class. She didn't really know where Leigh was coming from, but she gave it like 5 minutes. So she's waiting in the car park. 5 minutes go by, no Leigh. So she sends Leigh a message and says, okay, I'm here. Where are you? I'm kind of in a rush. Can you hurry up? Kind of thing. So 10 minutes go past, no Leigh. Now, Leigh's mom, Sharon, is kind of getting a bit annoyed, kind of worried at the same time. Leigh wasn't really a person to not be on time if she said she was going to be there at a particular time. So then after the 10 minutes, Sharon decided to call Leigh on her cell phone Nothing, no answer. Then she keeps calling. So every minute that goes past, Sharon keeps calling and calling and calling. I think she called her about 10, 15 times at the time. There was still no answer. Then around the 16th, 20th time that Sharon called, someone did answer. And then Sharon kind of had this 1 second of relief because she heard the phone kind of being picked up, and then no one said anything. And Sharon's like, hello, who is this? Leigh, where are you? I'm waiting for you. And still no one replied, but she could hear that someone was breathing on the other end of this phone. So she waited, and then all of a sudden someone does speak on the phone, and it's a man. This man then proceeds to say that he has Leigh Mattherws and he has kidnapped her, and in order for her to return safely, he would need some money. And if she didn't do exactly what he ordered, he would not hesitate to kill her. Then after this man said everything that he needed to say, he hung up the phone. Sharon is now obviously hysterical. She's screaming in the parking lot of this university, and her first instinct is now to call her husband Rob. When she calls Rob, he is obviously extremely upset, worried, confused as well, and he says, okay, listen Sharon, we're not going to get very far by shouting at each other. We need to do this calmly. So Rob says, let's hang up. I'm going to call Leigh and I'm going to see what's happening. Sharon and Rob hang up the phone, and Rob then proceeds to call Leigh's cell phone again. And this strange man then picks up her cell phone. Then there's an exchange between the kidnapper and Rob, Leigh's dad. And the kidnapper now says that he wants 300,000 Rand from Rob and Sharon. Now, this is kind of why I have a limit on my credit cards, because if I could swipe and get this much money out of every single bank account, I would be rolling in the debt. But apparently Rob went to different banks around the area in order to withdraw 300,000 Rand. Now, while Rob is trying to withdraw all this money, his mind is going and he's thinking of what else he can do, because he's thinking, yeah, okay, the money's only going to take us so far, but am I actually going to get my daughter back? So while he's withdrawing all the cash, he's now thinking, okay, I need someone else's help. So he calls a private investigation company and he gets a PI to kind of talk him through it. The private investigator then says to Rob, this is a bit more serious than the regular kind of cases I investigate. So he recommends that Rob goes to the police. So Rob did go to the police station and he did meet with an investigator quite quickly as he went in. And the investigator said that maybe we shouldn't give him everything that the kidnapper wants. So police in South Africa are pretty skeptical, and the police were like, I think that giving him the whole amount of money is not going to give you Leigh back. The police kind of wanted to see if this kidnapper was really serious. Is he really going to give back? Is there any kind of push and pull we can give with the kidnapper? Now, I don't know if this is the right tactic to do. I mean, if the kidnapper gives an amount, they obviously set on that amount for a reason. But the amount that the police suggested that Rob give this kidnapper was 50,000 Rand. So from 300,000 to 50,000 was a lot less than the kidnapper was hoping for. But Rob does do this, and the kidnapper eventually calls Rob back and he says, where's my money? And Rob's like, well, actually, I'm only going to give you 50 grand. Now, obviously, the kidnapper's enraged because that is 250,000 Rand less than he was hoping for. And that's a lot of money. So the kidnapper's just shouting at Rob, swearing at Rob, and then he just hangs up the phone. And now Rob is absolutely sweating. He is so upset with himself because he's like, did I just give up my daughter for only 50,000 Rand? I could have given it all. All these thoughts are going through his mind. But then around 20 to 30 minutes later, the kidnapper calls back and he's like, okay, I'll accept 50,000 Rand. So now police and Rob are like, okay, cool, we've got somewhere. Now let's get the ball rolling even more. So I assume that the kidnapper and Rob were constantly being in contact because the kidnapper called back and he arranged a time and specific place to meet for this ransom money drop-off. So while this is all happening, the kidnapper just hangs up, and about 2 minutes later, Sharon, Leigh's mom, gets a phone call. And she assumes that it's a kidnapper because they kept calling from Leigh's phone in the beginning. So she answers the phone and she's quite hesitant, and she actually hears Leigh's voice on the other end of the phone. Now Leigh is absolutely crying her heart out. She's very, very upset. Obviously, this is terrifying. But she says that she's physically unharmed. She's very scared, but she tells her mom, please just do what he says, because otherwise he will kill me. And then the phone goes quiet. So obviously Sharon and Rob are very upset about this, but the day has to go on and the money has to be dropped off. So the time is almost near and Rob gets in his car to get to the place in time. The specific area that the kidnapper arranged the meeting spot was the R558 off-ramp near Grasmere Toll Plaza. And at the beginning, the kidnapper kept persisting that the police should not be involved at all. But because Rob went to the police, obviously the police wanted to be involved in this whole kidnapping case. So when Rob was driving to meet the kidnapper, one of the policemen was lying in the back by kind of like where you put your feet in the back of the car. The policeman then put a blanket over him so he couldn't be seen as well. And now Rob and this policeman are driving to the drop-off point. Rob had the money next to him in a passenger seat, and he's driving and he's going, and then about 1 kilometer before he gets to the drop-off point, he stops the car. He tells the policeman to get out of the car because he's so scared that somehow this kidnapper is going to find out who he is, what's in the car, and he's just going to kill Leigh anyway. So the policeman kind of doesn't really like the idea. He says it's not safe, but he gets out of the car and waits on the side of the road for Rob. Rob then drives on to where the point is. He's so scared and shaking so much that he actually misses the drop-off point. He drives past the drop-off point and then he gets a call on his phone. And now the kidnapper is flipping him out. He is so angry that now Rob just drove past the drop-off point. He thinks that he's scamming him. And he says that if you don't drop off the money now, Leigh is going to be murdered right in front of you. So now Rob is even more scared. He turns the car around, like Tokyo Drift kind of quickly turned the car around. And he tries to go back to this meeting spot now where the kidnapper said that they must meet. So he gets to the drop-off point. He flashes his light 3 times, which was kind of the signal that the kidnapper and Rob said that they would do when he's there. And Rob just sits and waits. And he waits for about a minute or so, and then all of a sudden he hears a tap on the back window, and he turns around and he looks, and there's a man dressed in all black, and the man says, "Throw the ransom money out and get out of here." So Rob throws the money out, but he kind of hesitates, and he's like, "But what about Leigh? You said that if I give you the money, Leigh will come with me." But nothing happened. He said that if you don't leave now, I will kill Leigh. So obviously Rob got upset and he left. And he kind of hoped that maybe 10 minutes later someone would phone. Then Rob waits around an hour. He then calls Leigh's phone and it's off. Now he's really panicking. Then Rob did try to call the phone another 6 times until 11:30 the same night. But he then gave up and was just hoping that maybe the kidnapper would drop her off somewhere the next day. Now the next day rolled on and there was still no sign of Leigh Mattherws. And police knew that obviously this was not working. Something had to be done. So the police set up a 15-man task team in order to resolve this kidnapping case. On this team was a set of hostage negotiators, private investigators, and specialized investigators within the police unit. They also created a soundproof room within the police station in order to record any calls that were coming from the kidnapper, but sadly no calls came to this unit again. Now, police were trying to do all that they could to try and get Leigh back alive and well. And while police were looking into evidence, they actually triangulated Leigh's cell phone. They pinpointed a tower in Wakerville. So now that police had a more specific area that they could look into, they sent helicopters, cadaver dogs, normal dogs into the area so that they could find anything that belonged to Leigh. But sadly, nothing was found. So on the 21st of July, 2004, around 12 days after Leigh Mattherws first went missing, a man was busy in the area farming and he noticed a naked body lying on the ground, and this was a naked body of a white female. At the time, this man did not bring his cell phone with him, so he ran to the closest place that he could, back to his house, and he got the police there in about 30 minutes. So detectives arrived, they removed the body that was in the area, and they did confirm from dental records and medical records that this was Leigh Mattherws. It was apparent that Leigh had been shot 4 times, but her body was in the very, very early stages of decomposition. Her hair, her body, her nails, everything was very clean, especially the bottom of her feet. There was no evidence that animals had come across her body yet, but when police looked more closely, they did find 4 bullet shells underneath her legs. But what was more suspicious was that Leigh had freezer burn on both her hands and feet. So evidence obviously pointed that Leigh was not murdered in this particular spot. There was no blood. The bullet casings were put too neatly to have been shot at random times or random areas of her body. But for around a month, this whole task team that was set to look for Leigh Mattherws was looking through every piece of evidence they could. They were looking through any tips that they could get from the hotlines, but they were finding nothing. They were getting no closer to finding any suspect. Then around a month and a bit after Leigh Mattherws went missing, this police task team was stopped. It may have been because things were getting too expensive and the police force could not handle putting so much resources and energy into one case particularly. Then on the 24th of August 2004, the case was handed over to a senior detective in the South African police force who was known as Captain Pete Bielefeld. So Captain Bielefeld did everything and anything he could to try and piece together what happened the night of Leigh Mattherws' kidnapping. And what Captain Bielefeld did was he started from the beginning. He went back to the crime scene, he went back to Bond University to try and piece together the last moments that Leigh would have experienced the night of her kidnapping. What he did notice was that Bond University was very security orientated and very access controlled. So like I said earlier, if you were a visitor, you would need to sign in to the access control or to the security guard. So Captain Bielefeld went through every single visitor on that list, and they all had a particular place to be at the particular time. So they all had alibis, basically. So Captain Bielefeld then decided to go back to his desk to have a think and look at the files that the task team had left on his desk. And while he was looking through it, he noticed one particular piece of paper that described the night where Rob had to drop off this ransom money. And he said that one line really intrigued him. And this was a line where Rob described the moment that this kidnapper got really angry that he missed the target for the drop-off. And he said that when the kidnapper called him and described how angry he was, he said that he kind of let an accent slip. So Rob said that before, he noticed that this guy was speaking very well. He had a particular accent then, but when he got very angry and let this other accent slip, he said that the kidnapper now had a kind of Indian accent. Captain Bielefeld said, okay, maybe I should look into this at the university. So he went to the university and looked through the student records of everyone that could have maybe rubbed shoulders with Leigh. He looked at everyone who was in similar courses, but Captain Bielefeld was looking particularly for students who may have had any Indian descent. And while he was going through this list, one particular student stood out to him, and that was a man named Donovan Moodley, who was around 24 years old at the time. And the reason why Donovan Moodley stood out particularly to Captain Bielefeld was because he noticed that Donovan firstly was a freshman, he just joined the university, and he had similar classes to Leigh. He also noticed that Donovan worked at a particular finance department before he went to the university, which he had actually been fired from for fraud. So now Donovan Moodley is at the top of Captain Bielefeld's head. But obviously Captain Bielefeld thought, this isn't really enough to suspect a student just because they may have rubbed shoulders with Leigh. So Captain Bielefeld tried to think like a criminal on the night that Leigh was kidnapped. He thought, would the criminal try and go home and try and act as normal as he could? Or would this criminal go to a place where they could hide in plain sight? So out of a hunch, he decided to look for one of the hotels that were closest to the area of Wakerville that he could find and kind of try and see if any criminal was there. And surprisingly to Captain Bielefeld, one of the people who checked in at this hotel closest to the area that Leigh's cell phone was last pinged was Donovan Moodley. At this particular hotel, because it was more of an upmarket hotel, they asked for your ID number, your vehicle registration. According to records, Donovan checked in on the 6th of July and he stayed at the hotel until the 9th of July. And remember, Leigh went missing on the 8th of July. Donovan Moodley had also paid with his credit card, so Captain Bielefeld had ID, his vehicle registration, as well as his credit card on his file. So this was kind of a jackpot win for Captain Bielefeld. Captain Bielefeld thought that this credit card was very important, and he started to dig really, really deep into Donovan Moodley's credit history. And he noticed that in July, 3 large deposits were put into Donovan's credit card. On the 15th of July, 17,000 Rand was deposited into the credit card. Then on the 27th of July, 2 deposits were made into the credit card. And that was one of 14,000 Rand and then of 4,000 Rand. Captain Bielefeld also noticed that 2 days after Leigh Mattherws went missing, Donovan Moodley went on an absolute spending spree. Donovan was buying really expensive clothes. He was eating at really expensive restaurants. And around a month after Leigh had gone missing and was murdered, Donovan had actually taken his girlfriend and another couple to Durban, where he then proposed to his girlfriend. Now, for some reason, Donovan Moodley's fingerprints were on file, and I can only think that maybe the reason was he could have got arrested when he was younger, or when he got fired from the finance department for fraud, they may have taken his fingerprints at the police station as a precaution, I'm not sure. But the reason I say this is because Leigh's car had been discovered, and this was in a park quite close to Wakerville where her body was found. There were lotto tickets found in the car, as well as duct tape found in the car, which both had fingerprints on them. And when they ran the fingerprints, both came back to matching Donovan Moodley. But Captain Bielefeld also had a feeling that there was more than one accomplice to this murder. And even though Captain Bielefeld did have a lot of evidence stacking up against Donovan, he didn't want to go in guns blazing. He kind of just wanted to sit back and watch Donovan from a distance. The police also started going through Donovan Moodley's phone records, and they did notice that both Leigh and Donovan's cell phones pinged at the exact same towers at the exact same time. Coincidence? I think not. So with all of this evidence, Donovan Moodley was arrested on the 4th of October 2004, and he was arrested as he was leaving his house and got into his car. Captain Bielefeld then opened the door, and Donovan looked at Captain Bielefeld, and literally the first thing that he said was, "What took you so long? I've been expecting you." So while Donovan Moodley was in custody and being interrogated, he basically confessed everything to Captain Bielefeld immediately. He gave his version of apparently what happened that night. And according to Donovan Moodley, he said he had pulled a gun on her and forced her to drive to a nearby park, where he tied her up and placed her in the boot of her vehicle, and then went back to the university to get his vehicle with Leigh still in the back of the car. He then put Leigh into his boot and drove away. Donovan then said that he got scared because everyone was talking about Leigh, everyone was looking for Leigh, and he felt that he had too much attention on him, and he decided to then kill her. Donovan said that he then made Leigh get undressed, pack her clothes neatly in a pile, as well as her cell phone and anything else that she was carrying on her. They then picked up this pile, got back in the car, and drove to Wakerville, where her body was found. Donovan then said that they spoke and sat in the car for a while, and she said that she had to go to the toilet. So Leigh got up and Donovan let her go, and apparently Leigh was then sitting by some trees doing her business, and then he shot her. Donovan then later showed the police an area where he had burned Leigh's clothing, car keys, and her cell phone, and he told Captain Bielefeld that after he killed Leigh, he remembered that she had told him about the ring that she had gotten for her 21st birthday. So he went back to the burnt pieces of clothing and he picked out her ring, which was actually later found in his room by police at a later stage. But Captain Bielefeld didn't really buy everything that Donovan Moodley was saying. Yes, he did believe that Donovan Moodley may have killed Leigh Mattherws, but he didn't feel that Donovan did it alone. He said that he didn't believe that she was killed at Wakerville because there was no blood, like we said earlier, and she had freezer burn on her body. Leigh Mattherws also had a very deep cut on her forehead, which Captain Bielefeld believed to be from a knife or some kind of very, very hard hit on the head. So Captain Bielefeld kind of thought that Leigh didn't go as calmly as Donovan said she did. Donovan Moodley then stood trial in Johannesburg High Court in 2005. He pled guilty to all of his charges, and his trial only lasted 2 days. And during the trial, experts took the stand and said that Donovan was lying about a lot, and they believed that he was not acting alone, because they said that there was a strong possibility that there was at least 5 people who were involved in the abduction of Leigh Mattherws. In the end, Donovan Moodley was sentenced to 40 years in prison, and he will be released around the age of 65 years old. In 2010, Donovan Moodley did try and appeal his conviction, but it was denied. So in the end, no other accomplices were ever found to be linked to the Leigh Mattherws murder and kidnapping. But to me, I don't think that he could have done it alone. I think that if he was maybe really, really strong, it could be a possibility. I'm not quite sure how Donovan Moodley would have been able to lift Leigh Mattherws' body by himself, especially in and out of a boot, off the floor into a place that was higher. It would have taken a lot of strength and a lot of time and effort. And I think with more than one person involved, he would have been able to get things done a lot quicker. But we don't know, maybe he had some superhero strength. But there were also reports that Donovan was involved in some organized crime, because in January of 2004, there was 92,000 Rand that was deposited into his bank account. And at the time, he was not employed in that Department of Finance. Remember, he got fired. So he was not employed, and all of a sudden, magically 92,000 Rand appeared in his bank account. So was he kidnapping before? Was Leigh Mattherws not his first victim? Or maybe it was hush money, or maybe he was just a very good businessman and he magically got 92,000 Rand in his bank account. I'm not sure. You let me know what you think that 92,000 Rand is down below. But I hope that you were entertained by this case. Thank you for all your support, and I will see you again next week. Bye.